Lame duck agenda took a turn this week. Lawmakers seem to have dropped pension reform and a package of tax incentives. Investor Dan Gilbert personally lobbied for the tax breaks this week, and the bill would have allowed developers to keep up to $50 million a year in sales income taxes from future projects built on brownfield sites. The bills died in the House late this week, much to Gilbert's disappointment, who said it could change the scope of some of his proposed projects. And I thought it was also interesting. He said, well, I think I learned a lot about civics and government this week.
Doesn't work the way you think it does.
So did he, Nolan, let me start with you. Did he go to Lansing thinking, wow, this is going to be pretty easy for me?
Well, let's start by saying this wasn't just Gilbert going to Lansing. For the first time, the sort of Detroit business community mimicked what Grand Rapids has been doing for years, and they went together. Chris Ilitch, Peter Cummings, others, they went to Lansing together. This sort of bore Gilbert's name, but this was a group effort, and that's what I think swayed the governor. That's what impressed the governor. It's something he's been urging them to do for a long time. They finally did it. They brought up, I thought, a innovative package. It was limited in its scope. It required a lot of skin in the game from the developers. It wasn't just simply throwing mega grants around like we've done in the past. They had the votes in the legislature. They just couldn't get it out of the committee because Kevin Cotter didn't want it to come out of committee. And he has been probably the governor's worst friend in the legislature throughout these last
and he did say about
years.
this, he said if Dan Gilbert can't do this project without these tax breaks, then maybe the project isn't worth doing.
The truth is in Detroit is still a place where return on investment isn't guaranteed by the amount of rent you can charge. It's a city that was disinvested in for a long time. You got these brownfield sites sitting there that are going to take a lot more money than building out here on a field in the suburbs. It is reasonable to ask for some assistance to get those buildings up and going.
I think what was interesting, though, is I saw a headline this week that would these incentives exacerbate the idea of two Detroits, where, again, you have a lot of investment development in the downtown and nothing like that in the neighborhood.
I think you always have to be mindful of that, but we always look at that as an either or. We're either going to invest in downtown or we're going to invest in the neighborhoods, and I think we have to stop thinking that way. Downtown still needs investment. As Nolan pointed out, there is still this hurdle to market rate development of these old buildings that we have let sit for a long time and need more work than they should. And sometimes, in this case, you're talking about brownfield developments where there are extraordinary circumstances that prevent it. That shouldn't be juxtaposed against what we need to do in the neighborhoods. I mean, the neighborhoods need far more investment, I would argue, than downtown does at this point. And I think what people are saying is, if you're going to do this for developers downtown, what's the corollary look like in the neighborhoods? When does this get to those of us who sit out in neighborhoods that have not seen any investment yet or any reinvestment yet? When does that come online? One thing that's really interesting here, though, is you saw Kevin Cotter sort of aping far left politics here. He could join with some of the activists in Detroit who've said the same thing. Why, if you can't do this stuff with your own money, then maybe it shouldn't get done at all.
Well, then Detroit just sits there under that argument. I mean, the question isn't two Detroits, it's no Detroit. I mean, and I think that the development in Detroit and the developers who are coming to Detroit are probably providing more benefit to the neighborhoods than if they hadn't come in. You look at what Peter Cummings is doing.
I think that's hard to say.
And picking neighborhoods to go along with, and I think that's going to become sort of the model, the norm. And it's a whole city, even though it has different parts. Right. And if you boost downtown, you're already seeing spinoffs in the near term.
Let me ask you this then. So what about this deal needs to be changed, or what can be changed so that it is more palatable in the legislature?
The first thing that's going to change is that Kevin Cotter is not going to be there.
And that was the problem. He had the votes. I mean, the votes were there. The votes, even in this local government committee, they had the majority Republicans they needed to move this out, and Cotter still pulled it. So this wasn't a matter of fundamental flaws in the legislation.
One of the things I would start doing with these kind of things, and I would start doing with all of the conversations we have about downtown development, is putting in explicit things that are targeted for neighborhoods. When people see legislation like this that only benefits big developers downtown, there is no way to convince them that this benefits the city. And frankly, if you go to their neighborhoods, you wouldn't be able to convince them either, because you can look around and see all of the things that are not working still, all of the things, all the opportunity that is still passing them by. I think you have to start talking about these things in concert and saying, okay, we're going to do this, and this is for downtown, but we're also going to do this. We're going to, send a portion of this money to the schools, or we're going to.
So every large project has to have something side attached to it.
I think that's a better way to manage these things, to make sure that people don't get left behind.
Well, the idea is to make these more market sensible rather than less so. And I think this legislation did exactly what it needed to do. It was very selective, very targeted. It was benefit not just Detroit, but cities all over the state, and it required the developers to commit to a certain level of money going in the ground before they got anything. This wasn't a flaw in the legislation. It was a flaw in the legislature and the Speaker of the House.
Well, getting the deal done. All right, we'll see if that comes back around in 2017.